Thank you very much for coming out tonight to talk with us about the work that we do. As you heard, I work for IDLO in Liberia, but I want to talk more about addressing sexual and gender-based violence. And I think Janet asked a very pertinent question. Do we have laws to deal with sexual and gender-based violence? And my answer to that would be yes, we do. And oftentimes, the challenge for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence is not the absence of laws, but the fact that they can't access justice for a variety of reasons. And in our work, what we've learned is that access to justice for survivors of gender-based violence is really a maze of, social, cultural, economic, sometimes even geographical factors, affect how a survivor will be able to access justice. So if the answer is, do we have laws? Yes, we do. Do they always work? Not always, and this is why I think, we do the work that we do as IDLO. I want to share a story because when I was speaking to one of the colleagues this morning, I said, there was a time I almost quit the work that I do. And the reason I almost quit is several years ago, I have a daughter. She was 8 years old. And at that time, I worked in an organization where we provided medical services for children that had been sexually violated. And one morning, I went into the office to talk to a colleague in her office, and she had this child, in her room, and she was talking to this child who was 8 years old. She was crying. She obviously couldn't, she was in pain. She couldn't deal with the fact that she had to try and tell the counselor what had happened to her so that we could give her help. And I remember walking out and thinking, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, because what we're doing is addressing the problem after it has happened. So maybe this is not, the work to do. And I remember that day I actually left the office at 11 o'clock in the morning, and I was making the colleague laugh this morning because I said, when I picked up my daughter from school that afternoon, I was asking all these questions. Are you okay at school? Is anything happening? Should I know anything? Because it really got, close to home. And for a while, I actually stopped doing what I did. But then I went back because I believe that the law does provide remedies. And I have seen the law provide remedies for survivors of, of sexual and gender-based violence. Another story many years ago, I worked with an organization again, and we dealt with this woman who literally came to us with nothing on her. And, with support, accessing the courts, we were able to get, custody of her children back. We were able to get, spousal support and support for the children, and she picked up her life. So that gave me confidence that if we're able to push and persist, we can get relief and we can get remedies for people that experience sexual and gender-based violence. And this is why we do what we do. And this is why I'm so passionate about the work that we do, in Liberia. And I would like to share, a little bit of the work that we do, because I do think that in our own small way, we are making it easier for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence to access remedies. And the work that we do in Liberia is really threefold. So we work with justice actors to make it easier for survivors to access the justice system. I think many of you will know that policemen will be policemen and women will be policemen and women. Their job is to arrest criminals. And they're not always prepared and not always properly equipped to speak to survivors. Because when you've gone through a traumatic experience, whether it be sexual violence or physical violence or even just intimidation and stalking, right? I think a lot of young people relate to the more sort of modern or advanced methods of harassment that are more common now. And you know that when that has happened to you, you are really afraid. And the last thing that you want to do is speak to somebody in uniform who may not quite get what the problem is. So somebody is following you, what's the big deal? I always say, when you talk to survivors of sexual violence, you almost get a sense that, people are more accepting or accommodating of the fact that you've been physically or sexually violated, but they don't quite get it if it's not physical or sexual. And yet the impact and the trauma that you suffer is the same. So the work we do is we work with, justice actors to make them get that bit, to make them understand what it is to be violated, and to assist them to be able to be more receptive and to listen better and to not re-victimize somebody when they've had an experience. Because when you go back and you start talking about what has happened to you and you're looking for help, the last thing that you want is to feel like it's happening all over again. So we work with them and say, let's find ways in which you still get what you need to prosecute the cases, but without re-victimizing the survivors. We also work with actors within the court itself. So we work with prosecutors. What are some of the questions you can ask, right, as you're prosecuting? How do you make sure that the survivor gets to recount their story without necessarily being re-victimized or exposed or making them feel like it's their fault? I think for those of you that followed, for example, the Me Too movement that's been going on in the last couple of months, one of the things that was very pertinent is people did not speak, not because they didn't want to, but because you felt, if I then go and speak, then I have to sort of justify why it happened to me and not the next person. And everybody gets to know, my business. So it's again, working with prosecutors and saying, as you're prosecuting your cases, as you're asking these survivors to share their experiences, to make the court understand, how do you lead that evidence without making them, feel that they've made a mistake in coming forward. But also, you find that even with the judges who understand it, and I know that we might have a judge in the room today, even with the judges that do get it, sometimes it helps if they've got, court actors that are not re-victimizing, that are not making a big deal and making this particular survivor, struggle. So the reason I'm saying all these things is because often people think that once you have a law, it is enough. It is not enough. The people that use the law, whether it be the justice actors, whether it be the police, security actors, they all have to, we have to work on a sense of responsibility, on a sense of understanding the challenges that it takes for somebody to even access. So that's why I said when Janet asked, do we have laws? Many times the laws are there, but there are many, many challenges to accessing, the justice system itself. So for example, where I work in Liberia, one of the challenges that you have is basic things like people actually can't get to the courthouse because it's far away. So then you are working with the police to make sure that they facilitate survivors when they do get to the police. How do you make sure that they're able to access shelters, for example? And for the duration of the time that they're pursuing their case and their case is being prosecuted, they are in a place where they're easily accessible, but also they don't have to go up and down, back and forth. That's another challenge. Some of the things that we also do is to make sure that, we raise awareness. Because sometimes when it happens, particularly with teenage girls, you get a sense that they feel that it was their fault. Maybe I shouldn't have been there at that time. So you also work with organizations that, raise awareness amongst the youth to say, let's send the message out there. This is what you need to do when it has happened to you. It's not your fault. Make sure you report. Make sure you get support. And, raise awareness so that even your friends can help you and hold your hand to go through the process. So I think the more we do the work that we do, I'm inspired and I'm confident that we do have laws, but the laws need us to stand together and to push and to make sure that we, for lack of a better word, to keep pushing and pushing and pushing to make sure that those that have been violated, those that have suffered abuse, are able to have confidence in the system. Because many times people don't approach the system because they are worried that maybe will not be believed. In the areas that I work in, sometimes one of the challenges is that you fear that maybe, if the person that has violated you is somebody important or they have access, then you worry that there might be some interference with the processes. So it's also encouraging even the survivors themselves in sending the message out there that if something has happened to you, speak about it. You will get assistance, and nobody is above the law. And we also work and encourage the judges to move the cases faster. Because sometimes when cases are not moving fast, people begin to question if something is happening, is there tampering with the system? So it's also about working with the judges and assisting them to say, how do we make sure that your cases are moving faster and you're moving quickly and people can see that justice is not just being seen to be done, but it's actually being done and it's being done within reasonable periods of time. Thank you very much. We'll be happy to discuss more.